I never grew up with educators that look like myself. So, bro,
100.
I feel like honestly, like we are that new wave that make being wise, being smart, being educated cool, right?
Absolutely.
Wisdom is a powerful tool, but oftentimes we might neglect it because of who it's coming from. You feel me? But if we can chop it up with a young buck and really implant a seed, man, like that's it's more than just education at that point. You know what I'm saying?
What's going on, beautiful people? This is the Let's Grow Together podcast, where diverse individuals and communities come to serve, connect, and grow in areas that they're most passionate about. Brother Marcus, check in with the beautiful people.
What's going on, family? Good to be back with y'all people, man. Everything is well, man. Got some phenomenal partnerships brewing for Roots. We just partnered with a local semi-pro basketball team out here, man, about to expose them to the youth. Again, just took some kids to a book signing Sunday, talking about how to overcome trauma from childhood, man. Super powerful, super potent, man. Feeling good. Good vibrations, nothing less, man. How about you, good brother? How you feeling, James?
Man, you already know, as always, man, blessed and highly favored, man. Getting over this hump of the issues with my cars. So I got some great news about my personal car. I'll have that joint back sometime next week after thinking it was gonna take a whole month to get it back. I got the other cars at the shop, man. I had to do a swap out with one of the renters, man. But everything is going good, man. The programs with the kids is going phenomenal. I think I talked about it on the last podcast where when we started the program, none of the students wanted to be on camera with us. They were super shy, super antisocial. And now they're glowing like butterflies. When I'm talking about all of them were on camera, we're actually about to have a experience with them, which is essentially just a field trip. But by them being being an all remote program, if we don't really see each other unless they're on camera. So now most of them have agreed to go out with us to the experience. We're just gonna take them to a go kart track that has some virtual reality stuff. They have an arcade, they have axe throwing, and some other stuff that will interest the kids. But other than that, man, life is good.
Hey, that's gonna be dope, man. We don't got nothing like that out here in Fayetteville, man. I'm a little jealous. That's all right. I'm gonna have to take a trip with the kids for that one.
Yeah, bro, it's fire, man. They got some go-karts that they go up to 50 miles per hour. So it's like real deal. You got to get helmets, you got to sign waivers. So it's like it's the real deal.
We're gonna see what that driving talking about, but that's what's up, man. Kudos to y'all, man. Keep it up, family.
Appreciate it, man. But I want to hear a little bit more about the book signing because I heard some dope stuff about that. But today, man, we got a super dope conversation with another phenomenal guest. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guy, my brother, Zebadiah Hall. Come check in with the people.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it to be in space and time with you brothers. I hear y'all talking about kids, book signing, getting them out, exposing them and stuff. I appreciate that. Happy to be in space and time with you brothers.
For sure, for sure.
That's what it's all about, man. Appreciate you, man. And again, I've heard some phenomenal stuff about you, but I definitely want to educate the people more. So if you don't mind, man, just give our listeners a little bit more insight about your journey, right? From Chicago. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, brother.
Definitely, definitely. I'll start from a place of like undergrad, but just so people know, I come from the west side of Chicago. Spent a little time in Kansas too, but picking it up in undergrad. So we were living on the west side of Chicago. My parents still stay in the same house they live in now. We from the Austin area. People know about the Austin community. That's the second worst community in Chicago. And so it's on the west side. And so they stay on Laramie and Division. And so I would catch the bus. Then I would catch the bus from Division up to Lake and Laramie. And then I take the Green Line to downtown and then catch a train to get to either the south side of Chicago or into Northwest Indiana. And I had went to JUCO, and a lot of people don't know this, but I had went to junior college and I didn't graduate from junior college. I had went back home and my mom's like, you're going to definitely finish your associate degree. And so that's why I was making this trek, and I was making this trek to go to Calumet College of St. Joseph. And what had happened was I had finished playing ball at JUCO, so I played college ball, and then I went into an open gym. And the coach was like, "Why are you at this open gym?" And I was like, "Man, I just want to hoop." He's like, "You didn't go to a 4-year in hoop?" And I was like, "No, I didn't really get scouted." He's like, "You definitely got scouted because they were reaching out to me because they played in the same region, that kind of stuff." So he said, "I know a coach that need a point guard." His coach was out in Calumet College of St. Joseph. picking up where I started, catching the green line to get to the south side of Chicago or northwest Indiana. So if people don't know, when you get to the south side of Chicago or east side of Chicago, then you go into Indiana. I went to Calumet College of St. Joseph, which is right across the border, to finish up my bachelor's. And I had to go to a summer class to actually get to be able to play basketball and be eligible and that kind of stuff. And so what ended up happening was I was missing class, and my mom had just lost her job. My father's been on disability ever since I was born. And my professor at the time said, "You're not going to miss any more of my classes." She gave me the train schedule, and she gave me money to get back and forth. And she said, "I'm going to pick you up with my kids, and then I'm actually going to take you to class. Then we're going to drop my kids off, and then I'm going to stay with you, and you're going to do your homework, because once you go back to Chicago, you're not going to do your homework. And then we're going to pick up my kids from summer school or summer camp, and then I'm going to drop you back off at the train." And honestly, man, I appreciate that so much. And so when I engage right now, I'm currently transitioning to be the vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the University of Wyoming. I was just finished being the director of student disability services at Cornell University. Prior to that, I was the director of access and accommodations at Valparaiso University, where I connected with James, and we've been connected since then. And then before that, I worked at Calumet College of St. Joseph, coached there after playing college ball and stuff like that. And so for me, the ability to be in space and time with two young brothers that's talking about helping kids and being in the space where I know I had a lot of help to transition to where I am now, just make me appreciative to be in space and time with y'all. But that's just a little bit about my journey as it pertains to navigating the waters and things like that. But, you know, definitely with the questions y'all ask and that kind of stuff, we can open up and engage about more.
Hey, before James chimes in, I gotta say, 06, shout out Cornell. That's what Alpha was founded. So you are definitely at a very prestigious location, man.
Definitely. I definitely hear it all the time too. And I got a couple brothers personally close to me that's actually Alphas too. So definitely.
Yeah, I knew Marcus was gonna have to get his alpha stuff off. So we gonna let him have it. But because knowing a little bit about you outside of the podcast, and I was wondering, like, what made you go into like student disability services? But it sounds like it has a lot to do with your dad. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for me, I grew up playing sports, and so I started off playing soccer. I played basketball, played football, all of those things. And my pops used to take me to practice, and it wasn't until I was like in middle school when they were kind of like teasing me, like, "Why your dad always picking you and dropping you off to practice like he your mom?" And it wasn't until then I was kind of like, "Hey, Pops, why why you don't work?" And he was like, "I got a disability, and this is why." But he never talked about it in that vein. He just did what he needed to do and take care of his responsibilities. And so it wasn't really until I was deep into doing disability work where that connection actually happened. When I played college ball, I was also a tutor for some of my teammates. And so, and a tutor at the college as well. And so then I would tutor some of the guys, I would tutor other students. And so then when I graduated, I worked in admissions and got promoted up. And then I was like the liaison for the college. And so I was doing orientations and those kind of things. And then I was also academic support services. And the person that did disability services ended up leaving the college. And they said, "Why don't you do this?" And I'm like, "I don't have any experience." And so then I kind of accepted that role, and then I went to a conference, and I kind of been doing that ever since. But understanding who my father is and what he went through, understanding in our community, when I say our community, the Black community, we really don't unpack disability. There are times where I can tell you we might go to the park and the people in the community know that that individual has a disability. We're not going to let an outsider pick on that disability, that person with the disability, that disabled person, but we also don't give them the resources they necessarily need so they can still progress in those kind of things. And it's hard for us to engage around mental health and conversations and that kind of stuff. And so it just gives me the ability to be in the space. I think it's sometimes totally different for Black and brown students and even white students to come in the space and see me in the space. And so if you're thinking about the field of disability, and particularly working at universities, it's about 80-something% white, and then 60-something% white women. And so to see me in the space, and then to be at an institution like Cornell, to be the actual leader of the department, is really monumental. And so it's also just touching and moving in those kind of ways, but it gives me a chance to be in the space to do the work in that way. And as I transition, gives me the chance to elevate the disability conversation, but have a broader reach as it relates to the DEI work and that kind of stuff.
So I want to actually chime in on something you mentioned. You talked about the disability, but you also just looped into mental health, right? Being a Black man in a space like that, having the pressure. I want you to talk a little bit about the mental health and how you really endured and pushed through as well, brother.
Yeah, definitely. There's some things kind of I open my day with. I call them some soul searching questions. And so I kind of go to those soul searching questions so I keep me grounded. Try to do some reading, listening to different people that is salient to me. I might listen to James Baldwin speak, or I might listen to MLK or Malcolm X or Cornel West or somebody of the sort. And so I just staying grounded in that kind of way. Also, if I'm being truthful, part of it is the way that I keep my mental health is by keeping my head held high. I know if I'm not navigating the space as well, that means the young brothers and sisters around me can't navigate that space well. And so, as much as I want to be honest that I need to take care of myself and do what I need to do for my mental health, part of making sure my mental health is strong is making sure that I show up in the spaces the right way. I think that part of being in that space and being able to take care of my mental health is not needing affirmation from individuals within that space. My affirmation came before I left my threshold. And so sometimes when people are looking for affirmation and confirmation in those spaces, it is affecting their mental health. And so I'm never doing those things. I'm not also in the space to please people. I'm in space to do the work at a high level so people can have access. And that's somewhat of how I'll take care of it. But I got a really strong network group. Got a lot of guys that I connect with that are the brothers and mentors and things like that. And my family's really tight and supportive. And so that's where I kind of refresh and get it from that. But it's never seeking it from other places.
And I think that's so spot on. Marcus and myself, we do a lot of work with the youth, and something that we always emphasize in regards to mental health is having a strong support system and having people around you that pour into you. We call it the mastermind. But you also mentioned your soul searching questions that you ask yourself. We also kind of talk about ways that we deal with the mental health, because I like what you said. Like, all of this stuff is happening before you ever even leave your house, or you leave your room for that matter. So it's like you're preparing yourself for the day versus allowing, the day to kind of conquer you in a sense. Um, that's super dope. Um, I one of the things that I loved about you, Zeb, when I first met you was like you were like one of the flyest brothers that I ever met. Like, I'm surprised you ain't got on a bow tie and a bow tie. I mean, it's kind of off topic a little bit, but I'm very interested in knowing, like, where did you get that fashion sense from?
A lot of, honestly, my pops, when you look at the pictures and stuff like that back in the day, he was always fly. And then my uncles and cousins, and it's just kind of in our family and things like that. I think then when you begin to get past the surface of that and understand when it comes to fashion and when it comes to those things, those are African, those are things that come from the diaspora. And I think those things begin to become important to me. And sometimes I think the way that things have been co-opted in such a way, we don't always get credit, us meaning Black people getting credit for that. And so when you think about it, that's really salient to who we are as people and the way that we express ourselves. And so I just think as a part, and then I also just like to be flies. I'll be honest about that. I don't want to sugarcoat that. I like to look nice, and I think that's also part of looking nice, feeling good, and all of those things. And so, yeah, I just think it goes with it. But I just, I actually like the bow tie. Also, I think it throws some people off. So who's this young Black man in this leadership role in this bow tie brings up a lot of questions, and so. It's all of those things too, but I also wear bolo ties and other things too. And so I was thinking about that, and I mentioned that as I go to Wyoming, bolo ties are more of a Western thing, but I've been wearing bolo ties before I ever, when I was back in Valpo, I wear a bolo tie and things like that back then. And people are going to be like, oh, you're doing it because you're going out there. And it's like, no, I'm doing it because it's a part of me and who I am. And I think that's part of it. I mean, the great poet Jay-Z say I was who I was before I got here, right? And so I think that's part of embracing it as we go and transition into these different spaces.
Bro, one thing I love already is one is just the humble beast that is you. You know what I'm saying? And that's one thing that I love. Speaking of Chicago, you know, gotta get G Herbo a little shout out, but the humble beast mentality, right? For you to be calm, cool, and collective, but be confident within yourself, right? And again, there's a borderline with that. But one thing that I'm hearing a lot about you, man, is you really stay true to yourself. Those morals, those values, regardless of how many accolades you have, you keep with yourself. Just really tell me, man, how you've done a lot, bro. You have a lot of accolades, a lot of trophies, you know, on that counter. How do you continue to keep yourself humble throughout that whole process?
One is not letting any of that define me. I think that's important. I think sometimes as we're navigating the spaces as Black people, it's easy to sometimes forget where we come from. For me, I wouldn't change any of the stuff that I've been through, the good, the bad, the ugly, because I think it makes me who I am. I think my family is not going to let me breathe if I don't stay true to myself. I can honestly say when I'm sitting in these meetings and I got to make these really tough decisions, what's on my mind is not what the people around this table think. It's like once I get out of this meeting and the bros realize what decision I just make, how are they going to feel? Right? If James C. at Cornell Zebadiah made such and such decision, how does that affect him in such a way? I think that's a part of being true to who I am. I think one of the things that I'll never forget is I'm the baby out of 8. And as I come home and I visit, and my mom would say, "You just still that silly little boy that you used to be." And that means so much to me because she said, I haven't lost my son in the navigation of all of this. And I think that's so important. If I was to lose who I was, I wouldn't be able to show up in the space in the way that I do. I think that goes back to the confidence. I think that goes back to being fortified. I think it goes back to not looking for affirmation and confirmation. Um, I would just say my parents was there, my brothers and sisters was there. And so the richness of being okay with who I am was never a challenge or anything of that nature. And so I think I just carry that into the different spaces. I think that I carry that into some of the other decisions that I have made in my life and be able to stand strong with those decisions, even when certain pressures come.
Yeah, I genuinely admire that, man. And that's what allows you to be relatable and really be that bridge in between both sides of the spectrum, man. One thing that we really harp on is just being able to adapt to those different spaces. And it really sounds like I kind of hear the chameleon within you, bro. But I would also say, man, what advice would you have to somebody who may came from the same upbringing, but maybe doesn't see themselves in those specific areas, right? Even though they have the same ability and aptitude in which you do. What insight would you provide for them, bro?
Uh, Reading and learning more about who we are as a people. I think sometimes we subjugate ourselves to what society thinks and knows and or how society project us as people. One of the things that I'm clear on is science, math, reading, writing came from us. And so when people are in spaces and we're being intelligent in the way that we truly are as people and as gifted as we truly are, sometimes that's termed as you're acting white. Just because I'm intelligent, just because I'm all those things, it's not that. And so I just think it's important that we don't lose sight of that. And the advice will be comfortable in your own skin, be okay with who you are, and do your homework. Part of the reason that I'm confident is the more that I read, the more that I learn. I know I don't know anything, right? So put it there. But as I read and learn, I think what the real context is, it makes me confirm more of who I am and our identities and the things of that nature. I think sometimes we're so far from who we are and off centered because of the way that society projects us. Sometimes we're not understanding who we are. And when you understand who you are, I think you're able to make decisions. And so I will say in my mind, right, because I'm still a Black man in America, just to keep it clear, right? I don't lose sight of those things regardless of the accolades. But in my mind, I'm free. And I think sometimes it's hard for us to navigate those waters and be free in those spaces. And so I'm free here in my house. I'm free when I walk out of this door mentally, right? I understand what the cops can do to me, but also how I navigate the waters and how I do those things are important, right? Now, I don't say that lightly, right? I have family members that are cops, but understanding in the context of me being a Black man in America, things can transpire. I think also, as we navigate these waters, I think we tend to make things binary. And what I mean by binary, it's either right or wrong. It's either this or that. And I think we have to be in the space where it's this and that. I'll be clear. I'm a Black man. I worked at Ivy League school. Now I'm about to be the vice president. I'm going to be put in plenty of spaces to be a token. That doesn't mean I have to be tokenish, right? And that's where I think we can separate this. I think it's hard for us as we navigate these waters, especially as young people coming up. They say, how do I be true to myself, but I'm also doing this kind of work? I think us as Black people should be in all spaces, not just certain spaces. I think it's okay that I am in this space because I think that it's important for me to show up in this space with the identities that I hold. But it's not just me. It's not just about me showing up. It's also about me doing the work at a high level. And that's when it could be this and that versus this or that. And I think sometimes we put ourselves in these boxes that if I do this, then I'm selling out. If I do that, then I'm wrong. And I can do that and still be true to myself. And I think that's where it's really hard. But that goes back to, once again, be rooted in principles. But I think that's what's really hard in the decisions that we as Blacks, any other marginalized identity, aka vis-a-vis Black women, vis-a-vis women in general, LGBT community, disabled community, all those things, you're making decisions about, am I being true to myself? Am I being true to my people? And if I do this, am I actually being true or am I not being true? And I think those decisions that we make on a daily basis within the ethos of the environments that we are in are making us decide certain decisions that makes it hard for us to navigate these water and these spaces. And so if I go to this meeting, how am I showing up in this meeting? And can I show up and do my job at a really high level and not be a sellout? I think you can do both. But I think it's also important to understand the context. Just because we didn't make this certain decision doesn't mean I didn't sell out, doesn't mean I didn't advocate on working within the system. And how do you unpack that in such a way? How do you understand that we're in this and it's a long game, not a short game, right? And sometimes we kind of throw all our chips in one bucket and now that bucket doesn't work. And now what do we actually have? And how are you actually navigating the water? And how are you doing those things? And I think that's really important. Lastly, as you navigate it, I think sometimes, sorry for talking so long on this question, but I just think it's so salient. I think sometimes when we're in the space, we have to be okay with how other people that look like us show up in the space. I'm going to show up in the space a certain way. If the other person that looks like me doesn't show up in the same way, I'm not necessarily going to call them a sellout. I understand it's a bigger picture. I understand they need to feed their family. And I also understand they might not have the same fortitude or came from the same mental model that I came from to operate the same, or their supervisor or what have you might not allow them to operate the same. But what I'm not going to do is ostracize these people in front of other people. And I think that's part of also navigating this water. And how do you be okay in the way that people show up? And then if I feel like you need to show up differently, how do I pull you to the side and try to make that happen, right? I think those things, right? Because then we're going to that tension point. Is that person selling out? Is they not selling out? Oh, I can't believe they didn't do this, right? These are real lives. These are not characters in the book, in a movie. These are people with real lived experience. These are people that need to put food on tables and do all of those different things. And I'm not saying that you should take a role just for the money. I'm not saying that you should take a role and not show up just because you got to put food on the table. But it's a bigger context to the things that we're doing. And I think sometimes we might get other identities passes in a way we won't give our same brothers and sisters passes, right? And I think that's highly important as we have this conversation. You know, we might give this other identity a pass vis-a-vis. I'm gonna that's a grandfather clock. I'm just gonna mute for you guys real quick.
Man, but Zeb, man, appreciate that perspective because I love how you said essentially a wise man knows that he knows nothing. And the pursuit of knowledge is what's most important, because we created a lot of these different sciences. We created math, science, reading, not reading necessarily, English. So I love that. But man, I listen to you talk, man, and you are unapologetically Black. Like, there is no doubt in my mind. And I also have to give some shout out to Chicago, because we're raised a little bit different. So we come with a little bit more tenacity, or a little bit more drive. And I think that with that drive and that tenacity and that work ethic, it helps us navigate a lot of these rooms while also still being true to ourselves. Because you said it earlier, like going back home and talking to your mom and her saying, man, you're still that same, silly little boy. Like, that means more to you than what these execs at the table or this board of directors at the table are saying. So I think that's super valuable for our listeners, especially the ones that's young, that's navigating these different times of their lives, and they're looking to take on, more prestigious roles, but wondering, like, am I selling out to my community? Am I still being a voice for the voiceless? Because I know a lot of people want to be that. But let's change gears a little bit. You talked about being in a high ranking position at an Ivy League school. You also were at a PWI and Valparaiso University. And you are currently in a interracial relationship. How do you navigate that, especially talking about, being a sellout and all these other things coming from a Black community? Like, how do you navigate that, especially being in the rooms that you're in now, knowing that there are eyes on you, maybe for that particular reason?
I think for one, I think there's going to be some judgment regardless of what happens, right? And so I think on one side of the table, there are going to be folks that say, oh, he's with this white woman, so he's automatically a sellout, or he's automatically an Uncle Tom, or he's automatically going to understand us in such a way. And then I think there's some people on the other side of the table that think that they have a way in because she identifies as white and those kind of things. I think when it comes to being true to myself, I think it's the same thing, not looking for affirmation from other people. I think one of the things I think I failed to say in all of this, right, about the intelligence, the smarts, the navigating, the affirmation, all of this come from a place of love. I've been loved in such a way, right, from my parents, from my family, that my love outshined the hate that I necessarily receive for the decisions that I make. Um, I think that goes in all things when it comes to the fashion. I wear things, I might wear pink pants, or I might wear bow ties, bolo ties. I think it's all a combination of being loved in such a way that you are fortified to not care. I think I'm clear on certain things. Like, I'm not looking for white people to love me. My wife is white, and I want my wife to love me. I want people to love people because I'm about that. I just think that I'm clear on that. I think that interracial relationships can sometimes be tough because sometimes somebody seems to suppress one another. I think the beauty about our relationship is that even if we work on the same university campus, because I'm unapologetically me and she unapologetically her, people would never even put us two as being together. I think on the surface, what's funny is when I show up in spaces and they're like, wait, your wife is white? But I just heard you say, because I'm still unapologetically Black. I think when you engage with my wife, just when you engage with her in the way that she is, you probably might not think that she is actually married to a Black man. And part of that comes from a place of like, oh, don't you want her to act this way? No, because that would be Black facing, right? I'm clear on those things, right? I could be married to a white woman and we're not going to play games as if she's Black. I'm not going to play games as if I'm white. I think those are the things in which we put these things, and this got to be this or that. I think what's important to me, and I think what most viewers or people that see me on the outside don't know, me and her was dating when I still lived with my parents, when she was driving to the west side of Chicago and she couldn't parallel park and I had to come out. Right. I think those things are important because it didn't happen when I became this person at this Ivy League school or this vice president. I think sometimes people look on the surface and they're like, this happened and now he transitioned in such a way. I think those things are important. she was still living with her dad and I was still living with my parents, and we started dating, right? I think it was really hard on her family at first. I think it was hard on people that was so-called her friends at first. I had came from a place where we already had interracial relationships within our family. Um, Once again, not cowtelling and seeking love and all of these things in the wrong way. We happened to end up working together. We traveled together from time to time, and we end up liking each other. I mean, where it really happened was we were at a situation where we were both a mission counselor, and they said, who wants to go talk to the middle school kids? Which these are not students that are going to go to your institution next. So you're going to spend your time where you're not actually recruiting. It's just really about those kids. And so I was talking about, hey, I played college ball, and they're like, oh, what position? Kind of point guard, and this is what I did, but I also was the president of Black Student Union, and I was the president of Student African American Brotherhood, and it gave me a chance to do all these things. And I think school is so important. At the same time, she's kicking me under the table. And we probably like a month and a half into maybe 3 months at the most of her working and us working at the same space. I'm like, what the hell is this? What is she doing? Like, right. But at the same time, I can't show it because we're in front of these kids, right? So I'm like, okay. So we get out from talking to the kids. I'm like, what were you doing? Like, first of all, I don't know you, like super weird, right? And then she's like, no, the things you were saying to the kids. And I was like, oh, and that's where we actually connected at that touch point, right? And so it was things like that. So it was never about like, oh, because she's white, I'm going to do this. Because she's white, I'm going to benefit this. And I think people think and have those assumptions, but it's not about that, because I think I was going to be great whether I was with her or not. I don't say that lightly, because she is my backbone and support me, not because I need white support, because she's my wife and she happens to be white. Like, I think you can have those conversations and unpack them in such a way and not shy away from them. But I think that same conversation has to happen in any relationship, LGBT community, whatever, because those are two individuals with two different identities, and you don't want to be suppressing them anyway. And I think that's really hard for people. I think it's hard sometimes for people to see us in the same space and room because we're unapologetically us, right? And those things are happening, and I just think we got to be aware of it and not shy away from it. I think most of the time when people get those questions, they're like overly offended. I shouldn't be offended. I'm a Black leader. I understand that there's Black young people looking up to me, and these are hard choices that they have to make. And they need to understand, what place do I have and where do I stand when it comes to these conversations. And they should be able to ask this question without me being offended. And I should be able to give them answers that's salient to who I am, whether they like it or not, and not run from this question, because I think it's too many times that it's dodge. I know a question I get a lot is, what did you do, or what conversations are you having since George Floyd? And I said, if we just started having these conversations since George Floyd, that's really scary. There's no way that I'm with this white woman and the first time we're going to talk about police brutality is after George Floyd. I'm unapologetically Black. I unapologetically know who I am within this space, within society. And I think that's important in this context.
You have a limitless perspective, right? I heard you mention just the free mind to be able to think outside the box, right? And oftentimes you got to be outside the box, because the real question is, who try to put you in a box, right? And that's what we don't address a lot of times. But that was one thing I really gathered from hearing you have a conversation I'm extremely fond of. But how do people get out of that box, right? From a cultural standpoint, a lot of times there's stigmas we have to follow. There's cultural things that we don't even realize, right? How do you, again, get yourself from up under that rock? And what advice would you have from other people who are kind of stuck, and allow that to dictate them and how they move as of yet?
I think a lot of self-reflection, right? And I don't want to say that I'm perfect at it. I'm learning every day too. I think that's important. I'm learning every day of how to actually go into this role in such a way, because people that I am close to do not sit in these spaces as a vice president at these institutions or in these roles. So I'm learning every day of how to navigate these waters, to make sure that I'm being true to myself and that kind of stuff. I think the advice comes from reflecting on who you are and how you want to show up and what's important to me. I know that it was important to me to see people that look like me in certain spaces, and that's what gave me the opportunity to do it this way. And I think that if I'm not self-reflecting on who I am, why I'm in the space, what impact I want to have, I think it's hard for me to not do that. One of the things that I'm clear of is I'm in it, but not of it. When I'm in it, but not of it, I can be who I am. I could be true to who I am. I think there are times where people get into these fallacies where they start to love the wrong things. I'm going to do my work at a high level, but I'm not going to love certain things, right? Because I understand that part of the reason that I'm going into the role that I'm going into now, because diversity, equity, and inclusion is a problem. If I'm staying true to that and I'm in it, but not of it, I can do my work at a really high level. I think when we go into these spaces thinking, because I have this bachelor's degree and I have my master's, and then at some point I'm going to finish my doctorate and become Dr. Hall, that the blackness go away. First of all, I don't want the blackness to go away. Second of all, the society is not going to treat me like the blackness is going away. And I think we have to be okay with that. And I think it has to be bigger than me, right? If it's all about me, then how I make decisions is going to be different. But if it's about you two that's in this space, and if it's about other people that's in this space, I think then how I operate will be totally different. But I think also you just got to self-reflect. Without that self-reflection, I couldn't give you that response. If it was about me, I couldn't give you that response. And I think that's one of the things that it has never been about me. And that's why how I show up in the space have to be different. I'm really clear on the things that I do might harm the next opportunity for the next Black person. Does it suck that that's on my shoulders? And it's on my shoulders, so I can't negate that responsibility. And I think that's important. And so if it's really about the culture, are we actually doing stuff that help or harm the culture?
No, that's facts, man. You made me think about that Spider-Man quote, with great power come great responsibility. So but no, man, self-reflection is super key, or we call it self-assessing, because no matter where you're going in life, you need to know where you are right now. You need to know what your values are right now. And before you step out in the world, like, you got to check yourself. Like you talked about asking soul searching questions, but I'm talking about just in everything that you do. Are you checking off your morality boxes? Like, does this make sense for your family and the people that's closest to you? So I definitely appreciate that. And again, I know our listeners will get some tremendous value from that. The kind of the last question that we have for you is, what can people expect from you as the VP of diversity and inclusion at the University of Wyoming?
I think it's a couple different things, right? I'll go from a portfolio picture of kind of what's under my purview, and then I'll kind of abstract from there. I think one of the things that's really exciting to me is I actually get the opportunity to go to the reservation like every 3 to 4 months to engage with indigenous people. The ability to learn.
That's dope.
And then give support, right? It's just, right, that's super salient. There's an initiative called Black 14, and to be able to engage with Black people about trying to go to higher education to get an education, right? That's under my purview. There's a social justice research center that's under my purview, and to be able to think about social justice in predominantly white spaces, to be able to think about social justice in rural spaces and how we can help. That's really important. I think when it comes to, right, those are things that's kind of under my portfolio, and there's other things that come with it. But then when it comes to actually doing the work, being able to be authentic in the space, being able to want to do the right thing, but don't have to be the person that's right. Understanding that I hold certain identities and I don't hold others, and making sure I give a platform for individuals that hold those identities to be able to engage in such a way, and I don't think that I need to show up for them. Really understanding the environments that we're in. I think one of the things that we tend to do sometimes is look at the individual instead of looking at the environment. I want to look at the environment and the systems and the policies and the procedures, because that's the environment and the culture within itself. And then I want to be honest after we look at the environment and tell the people about the environment that we're in, so then they understand how to navigate that environment. One of the things that you won't get from me as a vice president is I won't engage with people and marginalized identities and tell them to be resilient. I will be honest about the environment they're in so they can understand how to navigate the waters. I think sometimes we tell bootless people to pull themselves up by the bootstrap. And I think we won't get that from me. I will engage around the environment, the policies, the procedures, and the systems. I will understand that, once again, I keep saying this, but I will make sure that I understand that these are not characters in a book. As much as I love to be a nerd, this is not about theory. This is about how do I practically make it where people feel like they belong and matter in this community. I think that's going to be really important because we're one community comprised of many. These are a lot of different lived experiences. And how do you make sure that people feel safe and feel like they belong because they actually do matter in the community? I think those things are going to be important, but I just think separating those out. Here's our environment. Here's you within this environment. Let's talk about how do we navigate these waters within these environments. I just think it's too many times when people that look like us or other identities that are historically left out are told to do certain things or be resilient and be tougher. And it's not about doing that. It's about understanding the spaces that we're in. It's also about working with people that hold different beliefs, because I'm not about silencing people. But how do you do that in a constructive manner? I think we're going to hold different visions, different viewpoints. That's what education is about. But how do we have think tanks and focus groups and panels where you can have both sides of the discussion, right? Some people like to call it right. Some people like to call it left. How do you make sure you lift it up in a way that you can have dialogue that is fruitful, and we can talk theory, we can talk beliefs, but we shouldn't be suppressing people within our community to do those things. And I think that's part of the conversation that has to happen. How do you have freedom of speech, freedom of expression in a way that's not marginalizing or suppressing other people? And then how do you move past the actual freedom of speech and freedom of expression to realize these are individuals within our community, and we don't want anybody within our community, regardless of their beliefs, to feel unsafe or harmed? And how do we have real conversations about that? You can have that belief and you're not going to harm this person. Let's talk about it. And I think those things have to happen in such a way that it's fruitful for everybody in the community.
Brother Hall, you got me about ready to move out to Wyoming with you, man. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it, man. But for real, the philosopher mentality, man, like it's deep, bro. And I see the passion, I see the resilience, but I see again the ability to really bridge the gap. And I know Wyoming, will definitely have a footprint left in it due to your presence, and that's phenomenal, man. But just as we kind of close out, man, definitely always love to recap some of the conversation, man. Just some of the notes that I took that really resonated with me, man, is understanding. And again, listeners, listen. There was a lot of jewels dropped. Being smart is cool, right? Being smart is cool. We don't have to run away from that. We don't have to again adapt to the cultural stigmas, right? Being smart is cool, and it don't mean you white because you smart, right? By any means. So being able to really digest that, and from a generational standpoint, understand that, your goal should be to take it further than those who came before you. And again, pay homage to those that come after you as well, and help them elevate. 2, just being free. Understanding, we are limitless, man. You have the ability to do whatever you want. You can manifest whatever you desire, but it does take the application and the hard work like Brother Hall has put in to get these different accolades as well. And then kind of concluding, man, staying true to you, right? Not always looking for that acceptance of other individuals, right? You limit yourself when you look for that affirmation or that confirmation from other individuals. So being able to walk in as your full present self and not always need the next person to stamp you off, man. Like, again, those were definitely some gold nuggets, man. I appreciate you more than you know, Brother Hall, and I hope that you all were able to really take note of that as well. Now, Brother Hall, before we kind of close out, man, where can they find you, brother? If more individuals want to tap in with you, man, how can they get in contact with you?
what I'll do is I'll shoot out personal email. They can catch me on Facebook and things like that. But the personal email is just zebhall85@gmail.com. ZEB as in boy, HALL at ZEB as in boy, HALL 85@gmail.com. And so they can reach out. We can get in contact, get engaged. One of the things that's funny, last time I did something like this, it was actually a live radio session, and it was a parent listening, and she ended up reaching out because it was a similar thing. And then her daughter ended up going to Cornell, and it was based off like they were already engaging and thinking about Cornell, but I was talking that I was there and I was from Chicago, I was from the West Side, and I think she's from Whitney Young, and we ended up connecting, and then she ended up going there. She actually played ball up there too. So it's just you just never know how that happens. So if I could be helpful, vice versa, I'm definitely gonna call on you young brothers at times to come mentor and help out with others. And so let's stay in community.
That's dope. That's dope. As man, listeners, man, continue to tap in. You know, this your boy James. You can find me on IG, JTurner0121. You can tap in with the foundation, A Greater Good Foundation on IG as well. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. Marcus, let them know where they can find you at.
You can find me on IG at mastermind_Marcus. And you can also find the mentoring group Roots Mentoring. Again, it's an acronym, Regiment of Overriding the Statistics. That's what we all about, growing together. And you can find us at R.O.T.S mentoring on IG. So again, thank y'all, family, as always. And as you know, let's grow together. Continue to keep flourishing, family.